and no one can stop me. Except for you, Gohan. Goku, stop him!
One of the most popular conversations in the Dragon Ball community is whether or not Goku was actually a good father. And while fans will claim that Goku leaving to train with Oob at the end of Z, or Goku choosing not to come back to life after the defeat of Cell is definitely his worst moment as a father and especially husband, in today's video we will discuss Goku's #1 mistake. And this is when Goku allowed Gohan to get crushed against Cell, as Goku's biggest mistake as a father ever. Now, one thing that we have to understand about this moment specifically is that from Goku's perspective, it didn't seem like he was doing anything wrong. Just like Piccolo, Goku was essentially just throwing his son to the wolves, the same way that Piccolo literally threw Gohan to his death against a mountain and essentially forced Gohan to bring out his hidden power and bring out the best of himself. And clearly Goku understood that Gohan had a lot of potential inside of him because he trained with him in the Room of Spirit and Time, so this can basically just seem like a classic moment of throwing your son to the wolves in order for him to learn and be the best that he can be. But in this specific moment, Goku showed a serious lack of understanding of his own son, Gohan. You see, Goku viewed Gohan's potential as something that he can just bring out whenever he's mad. What Goku failed to understand is that Gohan's potential came out as a child when he was cornered and there was no way out. And in this situation, it might actually seem like Gohan was in that situation with Cell, but what we have to understand is that in this specific Cell case, Cell was literally squeezing Gohan to death and Gohan couldn't even move. And at that specific point, you have to think about Gohan's mentality. Gohan wasn't in a position in his mind where he's thinking, man, I'm gonna get so mad and I'm gonna really give it to Cell and beat him up. Gohan was essentially thinking about the excruciating pain that he was going through and how close he was to death. And when we examine this anime-only scene of Gohan going Super Saiyan for the first time, even though this is an anime-only scene, it's a perfect example of how Gohan's potential comes out. In that moment, Goku fired a very powerful Kamehameha at Gohan, and Gohan essentially had no way to stop it other than to essentially become a Super Saiyan and to push it back. But in this moment, you can see that very similar to Gohan turning Super Saiyan 2 for the first time, Gohan had that brief vision where he basically thought about all of his friends suffering and all of that. And it's one of the reasons why sometimes the anime is so much more superior to the manga, because of these added moments where we truly get to delve deeper into the characters themselves. And when we go back to the moment of Gohan being squeezed by Cell, Piccolo directly points out about Gohan not having a warrior's gut. That Gohan is essentially a kid and he was worried about his own life at that particular moment and wasn't even thinking about bringing out his power and defeating Cell. It was Gohan's mentality, and Gohan has showed mental fragility at multiple points throughout Dragon Ball. A key example of this is when Cell came back to life after self-destructing and was about to get into a beam clash with Gohan, and Gohan was showing an extreme lack of confidence in himself at this particular moment, and needed to be coached by Goku to even attempt to fight in the first place. Gohan's lack of confidence, especially in a moment like this against Cell, is something that was very important, and many times it was his anger that overrid his lack of confidence and mental fragility that bailed him out of certain situations, but this was not a situation where Gohan's rage could bail him out simply because of what was happening physically to Gohan and what he was thinking at that moment. And to make matters worse for Gohan, this is also bad because from the very beginning, Gohan wasn't even expected to go in and fight Cell in the first place, as Goku was calm the entire time because he always knew that Gohan was going to be the one to eventually fight Cell. But the whole time, Gohan was thinking that Goku was going to fight him, so Gohan had absolutely no preparation, which, in a situation like this, when you're putting the fate of the world in the entire line, maybe it would have been better if Goku had given him at least some heads up as to what his plan actually was. But knowing Goku's character, it's completely in character for him to do something as bold and not very thoughtful, so this is definitely in character within the writing of Goku himself. But I will give Goku credit for something. Goku attempted to fight against Cell first, which was actually a very good thing, because in fighting Cell first, he gave Gohan an idea of how Cell actually fought, so if Goku were to eventually fail, which he eventually gave up against Cell in the first place, then Gohan would have a much better shot than he did, because Gohan obviously knows how Goku fights, and he knows how Cell fights, so he would have a much better chance just by observation. But what we have to understand is that when we go back to the moment of Cell squeezing Gohan, Goku was completely bailed out by a complete stranger who ironically wanted to actually kill Goku in Android 16. And 16 actually did this twice. The first time, when Gohan was essentially being squeezed, 16 essentially jumped in right after to basically distract Cell so that Cell wouldn't do anything else, and obviously we know the rest of history. Cell just easily overpowered 16, blasted him away, and basically reduced him to an android head. And this was of course right around the time that Goku was getting ready to jump in and save Gohan's life after Piccolo essentially gave him a lecture as to all of the reasons why Goku was wrong for putting Gohan in this situation. And this brings us to the next major moment, where Android 16 succeeded and where Goku and Cell failed. You see, Goku and Cell both have different ambitions for wanting to bring out the best in Gohan, and which is one of the most interesting things about the Cell games, where both Goku and Cell have an ambition to bring out Gohan's power for totally different reasons. In Goku's case, of course, he wants his son to bring out the absolute best in him so he can eventually defeat Cell, because Goku believes in his son more than anybody else does. And at the same time, Cell wants to bring out Gohan's power for the total opposite reasons, because he wants to prove to himself and to boost his own ego that he can bring out this monstrosity that Goku keeps talking about exists within Gohan. And as a result of this, both characters are trying to bring out Gohan's power the wrong way. In Goku's case, he just thought Gohan could get angry and just figure it out on the fly, and Cell thought by essentially extortion that he could do the same exact thing. And for once, Goku and Cell were actually like-minded in this particular point, where both characters agreed that beating the living hell out of Gohan and essentially putting him in the worst situation possible was the way to essentially bring out his power. And Goku and Cell were actually in agreement even though they were fighting for different sides. 16 figured out that when Gohan knows what he's fighting for and when he's talked to in a comforting manner, and when Gohan knows that he's truly the only one that can deal with the situation, that's how to bring out his potential. But the way that 16 brought out Gohan's potential was different, because he brought it out in a controlled manner. In the past, whenever Gohan would get angry against a particular villain and started bringing out his hidden power, he would just land a few successful blows or a headbutt or maybe get a very powerful blast attack against his opponent, and that was essentially it. Then his opponent would easily overpower him and Gohan's potential would be reduced to nothing. His potential was only brought out temporarily because it was completely based off of his emotion. But when Gohan has the understanding of why his potential needs to be brought out, and when his mindset is completely changed, that's when we see his potential actually maintained instead of just being an anger burst that would quickly fade away. Just imagine Gohan going Super Saiyan 2 for about 30 seconds, landing a really strong blast against Cell. Cell simply just regenerates from it, and then Gohan just goes back to his regular Super Saiyan state, or even worse, his base form. Then that would essentially be it. Goku didn't figure out, and Cell didn't figure out, the way to actually bring out Gohan's potential in a controlled manner. And obviously, as a villain, Cell clearly didn't talk to Gohan the proper way to bring out his potential. But from Goku's perspective as a father that we would think would know his son better, this is where he ultimately failed and 16 succeeded. And it's important to also note too that even though Piccolo was a bystander doing all of this, he understood Gohan better in this exact situation, but not even he was able to either speak to Gohan or figure out a way for Gohan to bring it out. Now, there is a theory that I've brought up many years ago that it's very possible that even without Android 16, Gohan probably would have turned Super Saiyan 2 eventually, because there was a brief scene where Gohan's power was raising after seeing his friends get tormented by the Cell Juniors, and Cell basically notes that Gohan's power was increasing, meaning that Gohan was getting closer to bringing it out. And to be specific, this could have just been a situation where Gohan would temporarily just bring it out, but because he doesn't truly understand what he was fighting for, the breakthrough wouldn't have been complete, and it would have just been a temporary anger boost. But it's also possible that maybe Gohan would have gone Super Saiyan 2 when it was extremely late, where the Cell Juniors either killed Krillin, or Piccolo, or Goku, or somebody else that Gohan really cares about, and at that point, because of Goku's mistake, it would have required the death of somebody else in order for Gohan to bring out his power. Now, unfortunately for Goku, this didn't work out for him either way, because later on, Gohan once again didn't even show his father respect when Goku was telling him to defeat Cell when he had the chance, and Gohan was having his own fun tormenting Cell. It is sort of poetic justice that Goku essentially puts his son into a horrible situation, and then Gohan shows a complete lack of disrespect for his father until his father basically had to sacrifice his own life and save Gohan, because even though Gohan had the potential to kill Cell, nobody was going to be able to stop Cell in that situation where he was going to self-destruct. And that was a very interesting way that the story eventually changed. But ultimately, the whole throwing your son to the wolves sentiment can be effective at certain points of your life, as it clearly worked with Piccolo when he was training with Gohan, but Goku always showed a softer heart for his own son, which is kind of ironic considering what he did to him against Cell. And it's very funny because even if you go back to some of the anime-only training scenes, it was really Gohan that was trying to push his father to bring out the best of him, as Gohan essentially wanted Goku to train him the way that Piccolo could. But for all of the reasons of endangering his own son's life, for a lack of understanding of his own son, and his failure leading to a former enemy having to come in and save the day twice, we can say with absolute certainty that Goku's mistake against Cell with Gohan was the biggest mistake that Goku ever made in his life.